The lawyer's retainer agreement sat on my kitchen counter like a grenade with the pin half pulled. $25,000 to start. Another $15,000 if we went to trial. Jennifer had laughed when I mentioned divorce 2 weeks ago, her voice carrying that sharp edge I'd learned to recognize. You can't afford a lawyer, Marcus. You know that. She was right about the money. What she didn't know was that my older brother David had been sitting in his car outside our house the entire time, listening through the phone I'd left on speaker in my shirt pocket. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Marcus Webb, 42 years old, assistant manager at a commercial printing company in Portland. The kind of job that pays the mortgage but doesn't leave much for emergencies. Jennifer knew every dollar that came in and every dollar that went out. She handled the finances. She always had. For 11 years of marriage, I'd trusted that arrangement because trust was supposed to be the foundation. People my age understand that money arguments kill more marriages than affairs, so I'd stayed out of it. I worked my shifts, brought home my paycheck, and let her manage the accounts. That trust became my blindfold. It started small, the way most collapses do. 3 months ago, I noticed Jennifer had stopped asking about my day. We'd always had this routine where I'd come home, she'd pour us both iced tea, and we'd sit on the back deck for 20 minutes talking about nothing important. Customers who complained about turnaround times. Her mother's latest health scare. The neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking at mail trucks. The comfortable noise of two people who'd built a life together. Then one Tuesday in July, I came home to an empty house and a note on the counter. At Sarah's. Back late. Don't wait up. Sarah was her college roommate, lived about 40 minutes south. They'd gotten close again over the past year, lots of girls' nights and weekend brunches. I didn't think much of it. My own friends and I had our poker games and fishing trips. Marriage needs space to breathe. The notes became more frequent. At Sarah's became running errands became out with friends. The iced tea conversations disappeared. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile that smile people use when they want you to stop asking questions. I'm fine. Just busy. You know how it is. Men in their 40s who've been married for over a decade develop a sixth sense. You learn to read silences the way sailors read weather. Something was shifting, but I couldn't name it yet. I told myself it was work stress. Jennifer had been promoted to regional coordinator at her medical supply company 6 months earlier. More responsibility, longer hours, pressure from corporate. That explanation held water until I found the credit card statement she'd forgotten to file away. I wasn't snooping. We kept important documents in a drawer in the home office, insurance papers and tax returns and warranties for appliances we'd probably never fix. I was looking for the receipt from our water heater repair because the damn thing was leaking again and I needed the warranty number. The credit card statement was tucked between 2 folders, slightly folded, like it had been put there quickly. What caught my eye wasn't the total. It was the merchant names. The Grayson Hotel. Fino's Wine Bar. Westwood Steakhouse. Merchants I didn't recognize, charges on dates I couldn't account for. I sat at the desk and opened the statement fully. The Grayson Hotel appeared 3 times in August. $240. $195. $263. Room charges, not restaurant charges. I knew because we'd stayed at hotels enough times to recognize the difference. Restaurant charges break down into itemized tabs. Room charges are flat rates with tax. My hands went cold. I checked the dates against my phone calendar. August 7th was a Thursday. I'd worked late that night, inventory audit that ran until 9. August 14th was the weekend Jennifer said she was helping Sarah move furniture into a storage unit. August 21st was a Tuesday when she'd texted me that she was staying overnight at her mother's because they were sorting through her father's old belongings. Each date had a story attached. Each story now had a receipt that contradicted it. I photographed the statement with my phone, hands steadier than I expected. People my age have been through enough small disasters to know panic doesn't help. You document first, react later. I slid the statement back where I'd found it and closed the drawer. The water heater could wait. This couldn't. That night, Jennifer came home around 7, carrying takeout bags from the Thai place we used to love. She set them on the counter and kissed my cheek, her perfume stronger than usual. "Long day," she said. I grabbed us dinner. I thanked her and set the table while my mind ran through scenarios. Maybe the hotel charges were legitimate. Maybe her company had booked rooms for conferences and she'd paid up front for reimbursement. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation I hadn't considered. I wanted to believe that. I'd spent 11 years building a life with this woman. You don't torch that without being absolutely certain. We ate pad thai and talked about surface things. Her mother's upcoming doctor appointment. A problem with the dishwasher. The new hire at my work who kept jamming the industrial printer. Normal married conversation, the kind that fills space without requiring much thought. I watched her across the table and tried to see something I'd missed. She looked the same. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Reading glasses perched on her nose. The small scar on her chin from a childhood bike accident. She was my wife. The person I'd promised to build a future with. And she was lying to me. After dinner, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her without more evidence. Accusations based on credit card charges could be explained away, twisted into misunderstandings or innocent mistakes. I needed context. I needed patterns. I needed the kind of proof that doesn't leave room for alternative stories. So I started looking. The next morning, after Jennifer left for work, I went back to the home office. We shared a laptop for household things, bills and banking and taxes. Her work laptop was separate, password protected, none of my business. But the shared laptop had browser history, saved passwords, and email chains we'd both used over the years. I felt like I was crossing a line, but the line had already been crossed. I was just tracing where it led. I opened the browser and checked the history. Most of it was mundane. News sites, recipe blogs, online shopping. Then I found searches that made my stomach drop. Best hotels in Portland. Downtown. Romantic restaurants near Pioneer Square. How to hide purchases from joint account. The last search was dated 3 weeks ago. I took screenshots of everything, methodical as an accountant closing the books. Next, I checked our shared email account. We used it for household correspondence, utility companies, and insurance and appointment confirmations. Buried in the promotions folder was an email confirmation from the Grayson Hotel. Guest name Jennifer Webb. Check-in August 7th. Check-out August 8th. One night, one guest, king bed. The room rate matched the credit card charge exactly. I forwarded the email to my personal account and deleted the forwarded message from the sent folder. I felt sick. Not the dramatic kind of sick you see in films. The adult kind. Heavy and cold and certain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a work trip she'd forgotten to mention. This was intentional. Planned. Repeated. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet office, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of traffic outside. My marriage was ending. I just didn't know how to start that sentence out loud yet. For the next week, I kept my face neutral. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner across from a woman who smiled and asked about my day while lying about hers. People in their 40s learn how to carry weight without showing it. You've done it with aging parents and financial stress and health scares that turn out fine. You smile through the pressure because breaking down doesn't pay the bills. But this weight was different. It wasn't external. It was sitting at my kitchen table, pretending everything was normal. I started tracking her location. Not with some invasive app or private investigator. Just basic observation. On Thursday, she texted that she was working late, client presentation that would run past 8. I drove by her office building at 7:30. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her car wasn't in the lot. I checked the nearby parking structures. Nothing. I went home and waited. She walked in at 9:15, carrying her work bag and a coffee cup from a shop I didn't recognize. "How was the presentation?" I asked. "Exhausting," she said. "But I think we landed the account." She kissed my forehead and headed to the shower. I sat on the couch and felt the floor tilt beneath me. On Saturday, she said she was meeting Sarah for brunch and maybe some shopping, probably back by 3. I called Sarah's number. We didn't talk often, but I had it saved from a barbecue we'd hosted 2 summers ago. Sarah answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful and surprised. "Marcus, hey. What's up?" I kept my tone light. "Just wondering if Jennifer left her sunglasses at your place last week. She's been looking for them." There was a pause, the kind that lasts half a second but feels like a year. "I haven't seen Jennifer in a couple months," Sarah said slowly. "We've been meaning to get together, but schedules have been crazy. You know how it is." I thanked her, made some excuse about checking the car, and hung up. My hands were shaking. Jennifer wasn't with Sarah. She'd never been with Sarah. All those nights and weekends, all those casual mentions of her best friend, they were covers. I sat in my truck in the driveway and stared at nothing. The neighbor was mowing his lawn. Kids were riding bikes down the street. Life was continuing like it always did, completely indifferent to the fact that mine was disassembling in real time. That afternoon, when Jennifer came home with shopping bags and a smile, I asked how Sarah was doing. "Great," she said without hesitation. "We hit up that new boutique downtown. Found some amazing deals." She showed me a blouse she'd bought, held it up for approval. I nodded and said it looked nice. Inside, I was making a list. Another lie. Another piece of evidence. Another reason to stop believing anything she said. By the end of September, I had enough proof to fill a folder. Hotel confirmations. Credit card statements with charges that didn't match her stories. Text messages where she told me she was one place while her car was parked somewhere else entirely. I'd even driven past the Grayson Hotel one evening and seen her car in the garage, 3rd level, tucked between a pickup truck and a sedan. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront her in the lobby. I took a photo of her license plate with the garage timestamp visible in the frame and drove home. The hardest part wasn't the evidence. It was the pretending. Every morning, I woke up next to someone who was lying to me. Every night, I said goodnight to a stranger wearing my wife's face. We still had our routines. Coffee in the morning. Quick texts during the day. Dinner at the table. But the foundation had rotted out, and I was the only one who knew the house was about to collapse. I decided to talk to my brother. David was 6 years older, a corporate attorney in Seattle. We'd always been close, the kind of brothers who called each other on birthdays and showed up for each other's kids' graduations. He'd been through his own divorce 8 years earlier, messy and expensive, and come out the other side with wisdom I now desperately needed. I called him on a Wednesday night while Jennifer was supposedly at a work dinner. David answered on the first ring. "Marcus, what's going on?" His voice had that older brother tone, the one that knew something was wrong before you even said it. I gave him the short version. The hotel charges. The lies about Sarah. The searches for how to hide purchases. The car at the Grayson. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then David said the sentence that changed everything. "You need to move first. Don't tell her you know. Don't confront her. Get a lawyer, file the papers, and serve her before she has time to prepare. She's already preparing, Marcus. She's just not preparing for you to know." His words landed like a diagnosis. Jennifer wasn't just having an affair. She was managing it. The financial control. The casual dismissals. The way she'd laughed when I mentioned divorce, telling me I couldn't afford a lawyer. She'd been building a fortress, and I'd been living inside it without realizing the walls were meant to keep me in. David continued. Here's what you need to do. First, open your own bank account. Move half of whatever's in the joint account. You're entitled to it. Second, get copies of every financial document you can find. Statements, tax returns, titles, deeds. Third, find a lawyer. I'll help you with that. And fourth, don't let her know any of this is happening until the papers are in her hand. I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat for weeks. What if I can't afford it? David's answer was immediate. You can't afford not to. And don't worry about the retainer. I'll cover it. This isn't about money, Marcus. This is about not letting her bury you because you are too afraid to dig yourself out. That's when I heard it. The sound of David's car door closing in the background, the echo of a parking garage. Where are you? I asked. He hesitated, then admitted the truth. Outside your house. I drove down this afternoon. I had a feeling you'd call, and I wanted to be close when you did. That moment, sitting in my quiet living room with my brother parked outside like a lifeguard on standby, I realized I wasn't alone. Jennifer had been isolating me for months, maybe longer. Keeping me focused on bills I couldn't quite pay and problems I couldn't quite solve. Making me feel small and trapped and powerless. But I had people. I had a brother who'd drop everything and drive 3 hours to sit in my driveway just in case I needed him. That's family. That's the kind of foundation that doesn't rot. David and I met at a diner 2 miles from my house. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But his handshake was firm and his gaze was steady. We ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth away from the windows. He slid a business card across the table. Catherine Brennan. Family law attorney. I've already called her. She's expecting to hear from you tomorrow. She's good, Marcus. Tough. Fair. She won't let Jennifer's lawyer steamroll you. I picked up the card and felt something shift. This was real. I was doing this. I'm scared, I admitted. David nodded. You should be. Divorce is brutal. But you know what's worse? Staying in a marriage where you're being lied to every single day. That's not love. That's a slow poison. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check, already filled out. $25,000. For the retainer. I stared at it, stunned. David, I can't. He cut me off. Yes, you can. And you will. You'll pay me back when you're on your feet. Or you won't. I don't care. What I care about is my little brother not getting buried because his wife decided he was disposable. I took the check with hands that finally felt steady. Thank you, I said, and meant it in a way I'd never meant anything. David leaned back and sipped his coffee. Now here's the plan. You're going to call Catherine tomorrow morning. You're going to give her everything you found. Hotel records, credit card statements, the works. She'll draft the petition and we'll serve Jennifer at the house. You won't be there when it happens. You'll be somewhere safe, with me. Because the moment she gets those papers, the mask is going to come off. And you don't need to see that up close. That night, I went home and found Jennifer asleep on the couch, TV flickering with some late-night show. I covered her with a blanket and stood there for a moment, looking at the person I'd shared my life with. She looked peaceful. Innocent. Like someone who deserved kindness. But kindness without truth is just enabling. I turned off the TV and went to bed in the guest room. I didn't want to lie next to her anymore. I didn't want to pretend. The next morning, I called Catherine Brennan. Her voice was calm and professional, the kind that made you feel like she'd seen every version of this story and knew exactly how to handle it. She asked questions I'd already anticipated. How long have you been married? Do you have children? What assets are we talking about? Do you have evidence of infidelity? I answered each one plainly. 11 years. No children. A house, 2 cars, joint savings, retirement accounts. Yes, I have evidence. Plenty of it. She asked me to email everything I had. I spent the next 2 hours scanning documents and attaching files. Hotel confirmations. Credit card statements. Screenshots of text messages where Jennifer said she was one place and the evidence showed another. Photos of her car at the Grayson. Bank statements showing mysterious cash withdrawals. When I hit send, I felt like I'd just launched something I couldn't call back. Catherine called me 30 minutes later. This is solid, she said. We can move forward. I'll draft the petition today. We'll serve her on Monday. Make sure you're not at the house when it happens. I asked what I should expect. She was honest. Jennifer will likely be shocked. Then angry. Then she'll call her own lawyer. Expect her to try to contact you. Don't answer. Don't engage. Let everything go through me. The moment you respond, you give her ammunition. Stay silent. Stay calm. Let the process do its job. I thanked her and hung up, feeling like I'd just enlisted in a war I didn't want to fight but couldn't afford to lose. David insisted I stay with him that weekend. We drove up to Seattle on Friday afternoon, and I spent 2 days in his guest room, trying to pretend my life wasn't imploding back in Portland. We watched football. We grilled steaks. We didn't talk about Jennifer unless I brought it up. It was the kind of quiet support people my age understand. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just be present. Not fixing. Not advising. Just there. On Monday morning, Catherine texted me. Papers served at 9:15. She opened the door. Process server handed them to her. She signed. It's done. I stared at the message and felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I'd finally taken action. Dread for what came next. David saw my face and poured me another cup of coffee. Now we wait, he said. Jennifer called 17 times in the first hour. I didn't answer. She texted. Marcus, what the hell is this? Call me. We need to talk. This is insane. You can't do this. I blocked her number. Catherine had warned me. The first response is always panic. They'll try to guilt you, threaten you, beg you. Don't engage. I followed her advice and turned off my phone. By Tuesday, Catherine called with an update. Jennifer hired an attorney. Michael Garrison. He's local, decent reputation, not particularly aggressive. He reached out to discuss terms. She wants to negotiate. I asked what that meant. Catherine's tone was measured. It means she's scared. She knows you have evidence. She knows this could get ugly in court. She's going to try to settle before it goes that far. Do you want to settle? I thought about it. Did I want a long, drawn-out trial? Did I want to sit in a courtroom and air every lie, every betrayal, every hotel receipt? Or did I want to cut this clean and move on with my life? I told Catherine I'd consider reasonable terms, but I wasn't going to be bullied. I wanted the house or my fair share of its value. I wanted half of the retirement accounts. I wanted to walk away without debt I didn't create. Catherine assured me that was more than fair. We'll push for that. If she fights, we go to court. But my guess is she'll fold. She has more to lose than you do. I asked what she meant. Catherine's answer was sharp. You have evidence of infidelity. That plays well in front of a judge, especially when it comes to asset division. She has a career she wants to protect. A reputation. The last thing she wants is her hotel stays and fake stories on public record. She'll settle. Catherine was right. Within a week, Jennifer's attorney reached out with a proposal. Jennifer would keep the house but refinance to buy out my half. We'd split the retirement accounts 50-50. She'd take her car, I'd take mine. We'd each cover our own legal fees. No. Alimony. Clean break. I reviewed the terms with Catherine, who called them more than fair. She's giving you what you asked for without a fight. That tells me she wants this over quickly. Probably because she doesn't want the affair details coming out in court. I signed the agreement. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. I wasn't required to attend the final hearing. Catherine handled it remotely, and I received the decree via email on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom across town, when the notification came through. I opened the PDF and stared at the official stamp. Dissolution of marriage granted. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt like the end of a long illness. Not joy. Just the absence of pain. David called that night. "How are you holding up?" I told him the truth. "I'm okay. Better than I expected." He laughed, the kind of laugh that carries relief. "Good. You did the hard thing, Marcus. You faced it. A lot of people don't. They stay in bad situations because leaving feels impossible. You proved it's not." I thanked him again for everything. The retainer. The support. The middle-of-the-night advice. He brushed it off. That's what brothers do. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jennifer at a grocery store. We both froze in the produce section, separated by a display of apples. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The confidence she used to carry like armor had been replaced with something tentative. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I nodded once, a small acknowledgement that we'd both survived, and moved on. There was nothing left to say. People ask if I'm bitter. I'm not. Bitter requires energy I don't want to spend. What I feel is clarity. I know what I'm worth now. I know what I won't tolerate. I know that love without honesty isn't love. It's performance. And I'm done performing. My life is smaller now in some ways. Quieter. But it's mine. Every choice I make is mine. Every morning I wake up, I'm not wondering what lie I'll be told that day. That's not bitterness. That's peace. I paid David back over the course of 2 years. He never asked for it. I insisted. Not because I had to, but because owing him would have kept me tethered to the worst chapter of my life. Paying him back was closure. The last thread cut. We're still close. Closer, maybe. Trauma has a way of showing you who stands with you when the ground shakes. He stood. That matters. Jennifer and I have no contact now. I heard through mutual friends that she's seeing someone new. I hope it works out for her. I genuinely do. Not because I'm noble, but because her happiness or lack of it has nothing to do with me anymore. She's a chapter I've closed. A lesson I've learned. A story I can tell without my voice shaking. That's growth. I've been asked if I'd ever get married again. I don't know. What I do know is that I won't settle. I won't ignore red flags because confronting them feels hard. I won't let someone else manage my life while I sleepwalk through it. The next relationship I have, if there is one, will be built on transparency. On showing up. On truth that doesn't need a folder full of evidence to prove itself. That's the standard now. Non-negotiable. Catherine Brennan sent me a card after the divorce finalized. It was simple. Congratulations on your new beginning. It sits on my desk in my apartment, a reminder that endings can be beginnings if you let them. I didn't lose a marriage. I escaped one. There's a difference. Loss implies something valuable was taken. Escape implies you saved yourself. I saved myself. With help. With a brother who drove 3 hours to sit in a driveway. With a lawyer who fought for what was fair. With evidence I'd gathered one screenshot at a time. But ultimately, I saved myself. The retainer agreement that once sat on my counter like a grenade now sits in a file box in my closet, next to the divorce decree and the folder of evidence I'll probably never look at again. It's there if I need it. A record. A testament. Proof that I didn't imagine what happened. But I don't need to look at it to know the truth. The truth is living in a one-bedroom apartment that doesn't lie to me. The truth is coffee I make for myself without wondering where someone else really is. The truth is peace that sounds like quiet and feels like solid ground. If you're reading this and you're in a situation where someone is making you feel small, where the numbers don't add up, where your gut is screaming and your partner is smiling, listen to the gut. Gather your evidence. Find your people. And move first. Don't wait for them to be ready. They'll never be ready to face what they've done. You be ready. You take control of the narrative. You protect yourself. Because you can't afford not to. The phrase Jennifer used to throw at me, "You can't afford a lawyer," was supposed to be a cage. It was supposed to keep me silent and scared and stuck. What she didn't understand was that the cost of staying was higher than any retainer. It cost my peace. My self-respect. My ability to trust my own judgment. Those aren't expenses you can put on a credit card. Those are expenses that hollow you out from the inside. I paid them for too long. I'm not paying them anymore. My brother David taught me something during those early weeks when everything felt impossible. He said that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the hard thing anyway. I was terrified. Terrified of being alone. Terrified of not being able to afford the fight. Terrified of what people would think. But I did the hard thing anyway. I filed. I fought. I won. Not because I destroyed Jennifer. I didn't. But because I refused to be destroyed. That's the win. Today, I'm sitting in my apartment with a cup of coffee, the morning light coming through the window, no lies waiting for me in the other room. There's no one to perform for. No one to pretend with. Just me and the life I'm rebuilding brick by brick. It's not glamorous. It's not dramatic. But it's honest. And honest is what I needed most. If you're tuning in from somewhere right now, living in a marriage that feels more like a trap than a partnership, I want you to know something. You're not stuck. You feel stuck because someone has convinced you that you are. But feelings aren't facts. The fact is, you have options. You have people. You have the ability to take one step, and then another, until you're standing somewhere new. It won't be easy. It will hurt. But staying hurts worse. Staying is just pain on a payment plan that never ends. Jennifer once told me I couldn't afford a lawyer. She was wrong. What I couldn't afford was another year in a marriage built on lies. What I couldn't afford was losing myself to make her comfortable. What I couldn't afford was teaching myself that betrayal is acceptable as long as it's convenient. The retainer cost $25,000. My self-respect is priceless. I made the right investment. The courtroom moment Jennifer feared never came. We settled. But in a way, there was a courtroom moment. The moment David walked into my life and said, "I've got you." The moment Catherine took my case and said, "We can win this." The moment I looked at that folder of evidence and said, "I deserve better." Those were my courtroom moments. The ones that mattered. The ones where I stood up for myself even though my voice was shaking. People ask what I learned. I learned that trust is earned, not assumed. I learned that financial control is often emotional control in disguise. I learned that the people who tell you that you can't leave are usually the ones who know they've given you every reason to. I learned that you don't need permission to protect yourself. I learned that family isn't just the people you're related to. It's the people who show up when your world is falling apart. David showed up. That's family. I also learned that closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from action. I wanted Jennifer to admit what she'd done. To apologize. To explain. She never did. Not really. And I realized I didn't need her to. The evidence spoke. The divorce decree spoke. My new apartment and my clear conscience spoke. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself when you stop waiting for them to be honest and start living your own truth. Now, when I see couples in grocery stores or restaurants, the ones who look comfortable and connected, I feel something I didn't expect. Hope. Not hope that I'll find that again, necessarily. Hope that it exists. That real partnership is possible when both people show up honestly. I didn't have that with Jennifer. But I know it exists because I've seen it. In my parents' 40-year marriage. In David and his second wife. In friends who've weathered storms and come out holding hands. It's possible. Just not with someone who thinks you can't afford to leave. The apartment I live in now is small, but it's mine. Every piece of furniture I picked out. Every picture on the wall I hung. There's no shared history weighing down the rooms. No arguments embedded in the couch cushions. No lies lingering in the corners. It's clean in a way that has nothing to do with vacuuming. It's honest space. When I walk through the door at the end of the day, I'm home. Not performing home. Not pretending home. Actually home. Jennifer kept the house. I'm glad. That house was full of ghosts I didn't need to live with. Every room held a memory of a lie I'd believed. The kitchen where we ate dinner while she texted someone else. The bedroom where she'd kiss me goodnight before sneaking out to meet him. The driveway where she'd park after hotel stays and walk in like nothing had happened. She can keep the ghosts. I'll take the fresh start. David still checks in every week. Not because he thinks I'm fragile. Because that's what brothers do. We grab lunch when he's in town. We text stupid jokes. We talk about work and whether the Seahawks have any chance this season. Normal things. Life things. The crisis has passed, but the bond remains. Stronger, even. Forged in the kind of fire that either breaks you or makes you unbreakable. We chose unbreakable. I never did find out who the other man was. Part of me wanted to know. Wanted a face to attach to the betrayal. A name to blame. But Catherine advised against it. It doesn't matter who he is, she said. What matters is what she did. And what you're doing about it. She was right. His identity was irrelevant. He wasn't the problem. The problem was a wife who chose deception over honesty. Who chose hotel rooms over her marriage. Who chose to make me feel crazy for noticing that the numbers didn't add up. That was the problem. And I solved it. Sometimes people ask if I miss being married. I miss the idea of being married. I miss the concept of partnership, of having someone to share life with. But I don't miss the reality of what my marriage was. The walking on eggshells. The constant low-grade anxiety that something was off but I couldn't name it. The feeling of being managed instead of loved. I don't miss that. Not even a little. What I have now is space to figure out who I am without someone rewriting my story. The credit card statements I found that day in the home office are still in the folder in my closet. I don't look at them. But I know they're there. A reminder that my instincts were right. That the cold feeling in my gut when I saw those charges wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Adults develop this skill over time. The ability to see when something doesn't fit. When a story has holes. When the math doesn't work. I trusted that skill. It saved me. Catherine once told me that the hardest part of her job isn't the legal strategy. It's convincing people they deserve better. So many clients come to her beaten down, convinced that they're overreacting or being unreasonable. Convinced that they should just accept what's happening because leaving is too hard. She said I was different. I came in with evidence and clarity and a willingness to fight. I thanked her for the compliment, but the truth is, I was only able to do that because David made it possible. He gave me the resources. The confidence. The reminder that I wasn't alone. Without him, I might have stayed. Convinced myself I was imagining things. Swallowed the lie that I couldn't afford to leave. He made sure I knew I could. The final hearing was anticlimactic. I didn't attend. Catherine represented me remotely. The judge reviewed the settlement agreement, confirmed both parties agreed to the terms, and signed the decree. No drama. No last-minute revelations. Just paperwork and signatures and the legal end of something that had emotionally ended months earlier. When Catherine emailed me the finalized decree, I printed it, put it in the folder with everything else, and closed the box. Done. There's a coffee shop near my apartment that I've started going to on Saturday mornings. It's a routine I've built for myself. No shared calendar. No coordination. Just me and a book and a latte. Last week, an older couple sat at the table next to mine. They were in their 70s, maybe, holding hands across the table, laughing about something one of their grandkids had said. They had that ease that comes from decades of showing up for each other. I watched them for a moment and felt something unexpected. Not envy. Appreciation. Proof that it's possible. That love can be simple and true and last. Just not with someone who thinks you're too broke to fight back. If I could go back and talk to the version of me who sat at the kitchen counter staring at that retainer agreement, terrified and unsure, I'd tell him this. You're about to do the hardest thing you've ever done. It's going to hurt. It's going to cost you. The settlement negotiations started 3 days after Jennifer received the divorce papers. Catherine called me Tuesday morning while I was sitting in David's kitchen, staring at a bowl of cereal I had no appetite for. Her attorney reached out, she said, tone neutral as always. They want to meet. Discuss terms. I asked what that meant in practical language. Catherine didn't sugarcoat it. It means Jennifer knows she's cornered. She has evidence of infidelity working against her. She has a career she wants to protect. She doesn't want this going to trial where hotel receipts and fake alibis become public record. So she's going to try to negotiate her way out before it gets messy. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like the first breath after holding it too long. She's scared, I said, half statement, half question. Catherine confirmed. Terrified. And she should be. We have everything we need to make this very uncomfortable for her in court. But here's the thing, Marcus. Trials are expensive. Time-consuming. Emotionally exhausting. If she's willing to offer you fair terms now, it might be worth considering. You get what you deserve without dragging this out for another year. I told Catherine I'd think about it. That afternoon, David and I went for a walk around his neighborhood. Seattle was gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matches your mood when your life is falling apart. We didn't talk much at first. Just walked. Finally, David broke the silence. What are you hoping for here? I wasn't sure how to answer. Part of me wanted Jennifer to suffer. To face consequences. To stand in a courtroom and have a judge read out every lie she'd told, every hotel she'd stayed at, every time she'd looked me in the eye and lied. But another part of me, the exhausted part, just wanted it over. I want what's fair, I said finally. Half the assets. No debt. And I want to walk away knowing I didn't let her steamroll me just because she thought I couldn't afford to fight. David nodded. Then take the meeting. Hear what they offer. If it's fair, you take it. If it's insulting, you go to court and bury her. But either way, you're in control. That word stuck with me. Control. For months, Jennifer had controlled the narrative. Where she was. Who she was with. What story I was supposed to believe. Filing for divorce had taken that control back. Now I had to decide what to do with it. Destroy her or move on. The choice was mine. That realization felt powerful in a way I hadn't expected. Catherine scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon. I drove back to Portland Thursday night, staying at a cheap hotel near the courthouse because I didn't want to risk running into Jennifer anywhere near our old neighborhood. The hotel room was bland and anonymous. Beige walls. Floral bedspread. A painting of a lighthouse that had probably hung in 10,000 identical rooms. But it was mine. No history. No ghosts. I slept better than I had in weeks. Friday morning, I met Catherine at her office an hour before the meeting. She walked me through what to expect. We'll meet in a conference room at the courthouse. Jennifer will be there with her attorney, Michael Garrison. You don't have to say anything. In fact, I'd prefer if you didn't. Let me do the talking. They'll present their offer. We'll review it. If it's reasonable, we'll counter or accept. If it's garbage, we walk and prepare for trial. She handed me a list she'd prepared. This is what I'm asking for on your behalf. Half the equity in the house or she buys you out at fair market value. 50-50 split on retirement accounts. You keep your car, she keeps hers. Each party pays their own legal fees. No alimony either direction. Clean break. I read the list twice. It seemed almost too simple. Almost too fair. Is this realistic? I asked. Catherine smiled, the kind of smile that told me she'd done this 1,000 times. It's more than realistic. It's generous on her end. She's the one who committed infidelity. In this state, that matters. A judge could easily swing things further in your favor. But this gets you out fast and whole. That's worth something. I signed off on the list and we headed to the courthouse. The conference room was exactly what you'd expect. Long table. Uncomfortable chairs. Fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Jennifer was already there when we walked in, sitting next to a man in his 50s wearing a suit that looked expensive but tired. Michael Garrison, I assumed. Jennifer didn't look at me when I entered. She kept her eyes on the table, hands folded in front of her like a student waiting for the principal. She looked smaller than I remembered. Diminished. Part of me felt sorry for her. Most of me didn't. Catherine sat down across from them and got straight to business. Michael, thank you for agreeing to meet. Let's not waste each other's time. What are you proposing? Garrison slid a document across the table. Jennifer would like to retain the house. She's prepared to refinance and buy out Marcus's share at current market value. All retirement accounts will be split 50-50. Each party keeps their own vehicle. Each party pays their own legal fees. No spousal support requested from either side. He paused, glancing at Jennifer, who still hadn't looked up. We believe this is a fair and equitable division that allows both parties to move forward. Catherine picked up the document and scanned it. Her face gave nothing away. After a moment, she set it down and looked directly at Garrison. This is acceptable with one modification. We need an independent appraisal of the house to confirm market value. I don't want any games with lowball assessments. Garrison nodded immediately. Agreed. We'll split the cost of the appraisal. Jennifer will have 30 days from the appraisal date to secure refinancing and pay out Marcus's share. If she's unable to secure financing, the house goes on the market and we split proceeds. Is that acceptable? Catherine looked at me. I nodded once. She turned back to Garrison. Acceptable. We'll draft the agreement and have it ready for signatures by Monday. Garrison stood and extended his hand to Catherine. They shook, professionals closing a deal. Then he turned to me. Marcus, I'm sorry it came to this. For what it's worth, I think you're both handling this with a lot of maturity. I didn't respond. Maturity wasn't the word I'd use for hotel receipts and fake alibis. But I nodded politely because causing a scene wouldn't change anything. Jennifer finally looked at me as we were gathering our things. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup slightly smudged. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I waited. She closed it again and looked away. There was nothing to say. We'd said everything that mattered through lawyers and documents. The rest was just noise. Catherine and I walked out of the courthouse into weak October sunlight. She turned to me on the steps. You did good in there. Stayed calm. Let the process work. I know that wasn't easy. I thanked her and meant it. That weekend, David insisted I stay with him again rather than holing up in some depressing hotel room. We spent Saturday doing normal brother things. Watching college football. Grilling burgers. Avoiding the topic of divorce except when I brought it up. Sunday morning, I woke up to a text from Catherine. Appraisal scheduled for Wednesday. Appraiser is well respected, been doing this for 20 years. No concerns about fairness. I forwarded the text to David, who read it over his coffee and nodded approvingly. It's almost over, he said. How does that feel? Honestly, it felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, I'd been sitting in my kitchen, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Now I was days away from a signed settlement agreement that would legally end my marriage and give me the resources to start over. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Relieved. Ready to close this chapter and burn the book. I told David as much. He understood. Divorce isn't something you win, he said. It's something you survive. You're surviving. That's enough. The appraisal came back Thursday morning. $285,000. The house was worth more than I'd expected, probably because the market had been strong. My half was $142,500. After paying back David's $25,000 loan and covering my share of the appraisal and some outstanding credit card debt, I'd walk away with around $110,000. Not enough to buy a house outright. But enough for a solid down payment. Enough to start fresh. Enough to prove that Jennifer was wrong when she said I couldn't afford to leave. Catherine sent over the final settlement agreement Friday afternoon. I read it 3 times, checking every clause, every number, every contingency. It was exactly what we'd agreed to in the conference room. No surprises. No hidden traps. I signed it electronically and sent it back. Catherine confirmed that Jennifer had signed as well. Now we just wait for the judge to approve it and issue the final decree, she said. Barring any issues, you should have your dissolution within 4 to 6 weeks. I thanked her and hung up, feeling like I'd just finished running a marathon I hadn't trained for. November arrived cold and quiet. I moved into the 1-bedroom apartment I'd found across town, a 3rd-floor walk-up with decent light and no memories. The first night, I slept on an air mattress because my furniture wouldn't arrive until the weekend. I didn't mind. The air mattress was mine. The empty apartment was mine. The silence was mine. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of a new neighborhood, and felt something close to peace. David helped me move my furniture in on Saturday. We spent the day hauling boxes and assembling a bed frame and arguing about the best way to arrange the living room. By evening, the place looked like an actual home. Sparse, but functional. Honest. David ordered pizza and we sat on the floor eating it because I didn't have a table yet. He raised his beer. To new beginnings, he said. I clinked my bottle against his. To brothers who show up, I countered. We both drank to that. The dissolution decree arrived via email on a Tuesday in late November. I was at work when Catherine's message came through. It's official. Attached is your final decree. Congratulations on closing this chapter. I opened the PDF on my phone, standing in the printing warehouse surrounded by the hum of machines. The judge's signature was right there at the bottom. Dissolution of marriage granted. Effective immediately. I forwarded it to David with a single word. Done. His response was instant. Proud of you. I didn't tell anyone at work. Didn't post about it online. Didn't make a big announcement. Divorce isn't something you celebrate like a promotion or a birthday. It's something you acknowledge quietly and move on from. That night, I cooked dinner in my new apartment. Pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy. I ate at the counter because the table I'd ordered hadn't arrived yet. And I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Content. Not happy, not yet. But content. Stable. Grounded. Like I was standing on a floor that wouldn't collapse. Jennifer reached out 2 weeks after the decree was finalized. I'd unblocked her number because Catherine said there might be loose ends to tie up, final documents to sign, that kind of thing. The text came late on a Thursday night. "Marcus, I know I don't have the right to ask, but can we talk? Just once. I need to say some things." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Wanted the apology I'd never gotten. The explanation. The closure. But another part of me knew better. Adults my age understand that closure doesn't come from other people. It comes from yourself. I didn't respond. She tried again 2 days later. "Please. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know I'm sorry. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. You deserved better." The message sat in my phone like a splinter. Small but irritating. I thought about responding. Thought about telling her exactly what I thought of her apologies and her hotel stays and her lies. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't give me back the year I spent being gaslight. It would just keep me tethered to someone I'd worked hard to separate from. So I deleted the messages and blocked her number again. That was my response. Silence. It was kinder than what I wanted to say and more final than any words could be. Christmas came and went. I spent it with David and his family in Seattle. His kids, my niece and nephew, were loud and chaotic and exactly the distraction I needed. We played board games and watched movies and ate too much. Nobody asked about Jennifer. Nobody brought up the divorce. It was just family being family. Normal. Easy. On Christmas night, after the kids were in bed, David and I sat in his living room with the tree lights glowing softly. "You did it," he said quietly. "You got through the hardest year of your life and you came out intact." I didn't feel intact. I felt like a broken bone that had healed crooked. Functional but not the same. I told David as much. He nodded. "That's what healing looks like," he said. "You're not supposed to be the same. You're supposed to be stronger." In January, I got a promotion at work. It wasn't huge. Assistant manager to operations manager. A modest raise and a bit more responsibility. But it felt significant. Like life was confirming that I'd made the right choices. That betting on myself hadn't been a mistake. My boss, a straightforward guy named Carl who didn't waste words, called me into his office to tell me, "You've been solid this year, Marcus. Focused. Reliable. We need more of that energy and leadership." I accepted the position and thanked him, leaving out the part where being focused and reliable was easier when you weren't spending every evening wondering where your wife really was. The apartment started to feel like home. I bought a table. Hung some pictures. Adopted a cat from the shelter, a scruffy orange tabby I named Boone. He was standoffish at first, suspicious of affection, which felt appropriate. We were both learning how to trust again. By February, Boone had claimed the sunny spot by the living room window as his territory, and I'd claimed early mornings with coffee and silence as mine. It was a small life. Quiet. But it was mine in a way nothing had been mine in a long time. One Saturday in March, I drove past the old house. I didn't mean to. I was running errands and took a wrong turn, ended up on the familiar street before I realized where I was. I slowed down as I passed. The lawn was overgrown. The paint on the shutters looked faded. There was a different car in the driveway, something sporty and red that definitely wasn't Jennifer's. I wondered if she'd moved. If she'd sold the place despite refinancing. Or if that was someone else's car parked there like mine used to be. I didn't stop to find out. I just kept driving, and by the time I reached the end of the block, the house was behind me. Literally and figuratively. David checked in regularly. Not every day, but enough that I knew he was keeping an eye on me. We'd text about inconsequential things. A funny headline. A bad call in a basketball game. Plans for his next visit to Portland. The consistency mattered more than the content. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone. That I had people. That the isolation Jennifer had cultivated around me was gone. I'd rebuilt my circle, small but solid. By spring, I'd paid David back in full. It took careful budgeting and a few extra shifts, but I did it. I handed him a check during one of his visits, and he tried to refuse it. "Marcus, you don't have to do this now. You're still getting on your feet." I insisted. "This isn't about obligation," I said. "It's about closing the loop. You gave me the tools to save myself. Letting me pay you back is part of that." He understood. He took the check and we moved on, the debt cleared in every sense. I started dating again in May. Nothing serious. Coffee with a woman named Rachel I'd met at a bookstore. Dinner with a coworker's friend who laughed easily and didn't ask about my past until the third date. I wasn't looking for forever. I was relearning how to be in a room with someone without wondering what they weren't telling me. It was harder than I'd expected. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But I was trying. That felt like progress. One evening in June, almost exactly a year after I'd first found the hotel charges, I sat on my balcony with Boone curled up at my feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked almost unreal. I thought about where I'd been a year ago. Paralyzed with fear. Drowning in lies. Convinced I was trapped. And I thought about where I was now. Free. Stable. Building a life that didn't require a folder of evidence to prove it was real. The distance between those 2 points felt enormous. Like I'd crossed a continent on foot. I thought about Jennifer sometimes. Wondered if she ever thought about what she'd done. If she regretted it. If she'd learned anything. But those thoughts didn't linger the way they used to. They were just passing curiosities, like wondering about an old classmate you haven't seen in decades. She wasn't part of my story anymore. She was a footnote. A chapter that taught me what I wouldn't tolerate. That was her legacy. Not love. Not partnership. Just a lesson. Catherine sent me a holiday card that year. It was professional but warm. Wishing you peace and clarity in the year ahead. I appreciated the sentiment. Peace and clarity were exactly what I'd found. Not through some dramatic revelation or perfect revenge. Just through choosing myself. Through refusing to stay small because someone else needed me to be. Through taking the terrifying step of calling a lawyer and trusting that the floor wouldn't disappear beneath me. It hadn't. The floor had held. I'd held. By the time my 1-year anniversary of living alone rolled around, I'd stopped marking time by the divorce. I marked it by other things. The first time Boone purred in my lap. The promotion. The weekend David and I went hiking and got caught in a rainstorm and laughed about it over terrible diner coffee. The quiet Sunday mornings with a book and no agenda. Those were the moments that mattered. Not the date the papers were served. Not the date the decree was signed. The moments I'd built afterward. The life I was living now. People asked if I was happy. I told them I was working on it. Happiness felt like a destination I wasn't quite ready to claim. But I was content. I was safe. I was honest. Those were foundation stones. Happiness could build on them later. For now, it was enough to wake up every morning and not dread what the day would reveal. It was enough to come home to an apartment that didn't lie. It was enough to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. The biggest surprise was how ordinary life became. After months of chaos and fear and legal maneuvering, the return to routine felt almost anticlimactic. I went to work. I paid bills. I grocery shopped. I watched baseball games with the sound low. I texted friends. I fed the cat. Normal, boring, beautiful life. The kind of life people take for granted until they lose it. I didn't take it for granted. Every mundane moment felt like a gift I'd fought for. There were hard days, of course. Days when I felt lonely. Days when I wondered if I'd ever trust someone enough to build a life with them again. Days when I passed a couple holding hands in the grocery store and felt a pang of something that wasn't quite envy but wasn't quite indifference either. Those days were real. But they weren't the whole story. The whole story was that I'd survived. I'd faced the worst betrayal of my life and come out the other side intact. Scarred, yes. Changed, absolutely. But intact. David told me once that the goal isn't to be unchanged by hard things. The goal is to be shaped by them in ways that make you stronger. I thought about that a lot. The divorce had changed me. Made me more cautious. More aware of red flags. Less willing to ignore my instincts when something felt off. But it had also made me braver. I'd done something I thought was impossible. I'd stood up for myself when everything in me wanted to stay small and safe. That bravery didn't disappear when the crisis ended. It stayed. It became part of who I was. I started volunteering at a community center that fall, helping with financial literacy classes for people going through difficult transitions. Divorce. Job loss. Medical debt. I didn't tell them my story unless they asked. But when they did, I was honest. I told them about the hotel charges and the lies and the fear. I told them about David and Catherine and the retainer I couldn't afford until someone made it possible. I told them about the settlement and the apartment and the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding. And I told them the truth I'd learned the hard way. You're not stuck. You feel stuck because someone has convinced you that you are. But feelings aren't facts. The class participants were all ages. Some younger than me. Some older. All of them carrying weight they didn't ask for. I saw myself in every one of them. The doubt. The fear. The shame of admitting that something in their life wasn't working. I tried to offer what David had offered me. Not solutions. Not easy answers. Just a reminder that they weren't alone. That other people had stood where they were standing and found a way forward. That the first step was the hardest, but every step after that got a little easier. One woman in her 50s, Maria, came up to me after class one night. She'd been married 23 years to a man who controlled every dollar. She had no access to bank accounts. No credit cards in her name. No idea what their assets even were. Her story made my situation look simple by comparison. She asked me how I found the courage to leave. I thought about it for a moment. Then I told her the truth. I didn't find courage. Courage found me. It showed up in the form of my brother sitting in a driveway. It showed up in the form of a lawyer who believed me. It showed up in the form of evidence I'd gathered one screenshot at a time. You don't have to feel brave to do brave things. You just have to do them scared. Maria started crying. Not sad crying. Relief crying. Like someone had given her permission to stop pretending everything was fine. She thanked me and left, and I hoped she'd take that first step. Whatever her first step looked like. Opening a bank account. Calling a lawyer. Talking to a trusted friend. Just something. Anything. Movement in the direction of freedom. I never saw her again after that night, but I hope she made it out. The second year after the divorce was quieter than the first. Less dramatic. More stable. I dated occasionally but nothing serious. Focused on work and got another small promotion. Took a weekend trip to the coast with David and his family. Read more books. Spent less time scrolling through my phone looking for problems that didn't exist. Life became less about survival and more about living. The shift was subtle but significant. I ran into Jennifer's sister at a coffee shop one afternoon in late autumn. Laura had always been kind to me during the marriage, and the divorce had put her in an awkward position. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she wasn't sure whether to acknowledge me or pretend she hadn't noticed. I made it easy. I walked over and said hello. She relaxed slightly. We made small talk for a few minutes. Work. Weather. The holidays coming up. Then she hesitated and said something that surprised me. "I'm sorry, Marcus. For what happened? I didn't know until it was over, but if I had, I would have told you. Jennifer made her choices, but you didn't deserve any of it." Her apology meant more than Jennifer's texts ever could have. It was genuine. Unprompted. Honest. I thanked her and told her I appreciated it. We parted ways cordially, and I walked back to my car feeling something unexpected. Forgiveness. Not for Jennifer. For the situation. For the people caught in the crossfire who hadn't chosen sides but had been forced to navigate the wreckage anyway. Laura was one of those people. She didn't owe me an apology, but she'd given one anyway. That said something about character that I respected. By the time the 3rd anniversary of my separation rolled around, I'd stopped counting. The divorce wasn't a defining feature of my identity anymore. It was just something that had happened. Part of my history. A chapter that taught me things I needed to learn. But not the whole book. Not even close. I was writing new chapters now. Better ones. Chapters where I showed up for myself. Where I trusted my instincts. Where I refused to settle for anything less than honesty. David called me on what would have been my 14th wedding anniversary. I hadn't even remembered the date until he mentioned it. "You doing okay today?" he asked. I realized I was. More than okay. I was good. The date didn't sting the way it might have a year or two earlier. It was just a day. Another Thursday. I told David as much, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Good," he said. "That's real healing. When the calendar stops having power over you." We talked for a while longer, about nothing important, and when we hung up, I felt grateful. For him. For the path I'd walked. For the person I'd become because of it. If I could give advice to anyone standing where I stood 3 years ago, terrified and trapped and convinced they couldn't afford to leave, it would be this. You can't afford to stay. Whatever the cost of leaving, staying costs more. It costs your peace. Your self-respect. Your ability to trust yourself. Those aren't expenses you can put on a payment plan. Those are expenses that compound until they bury you. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait for permission. Just move. One step. Then another. Get a bank account. Talk to a lawyer. Call a trusted friend. Do something that moves you toward the exit. The door might be heavy, but it opens. I promise you it opens. And if you're the person on the other side, the David in someone's story, show up. Sit in the driveway. Write the check. Make the call. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be present. Your presence might be the difference between someone staying trapped and someone finding freedom. It was for me. David didn't rescue me. He gave me the tools to rescue myself. That's what love looks like. Not fixing. Not solving. Just standing close enough that the person knows they're not alone. The retainer agreement that terrified me 3 years ago sits in a box in my closet now. I don't look at it often. But when I do, I don't feel fear anymore. I feel pride. Pride that I faced something impossible and did it anyway. Pride that I bet on myself when the odds felt stacked against me. Pride that I chose truth over comfort. That document represents the scariest decision I've ever made. It also represents the best one. Because on the other side of that fear was freedom. Was peace. Was a life that belonged to me. And that life, small and quiet and honest as it is worth more than any marriage built on lies ever could be. Jennifer said I couldn't afford a lawyer. She was wrong. What I couldn't afford was another day pretending. Another night wondering. Another year of living in a house that felt like a stage set. The lawyer cost money. But staying would have cost me everything. I made the right investment. And if you're reading this and wondering if you can afford to leave, ask yourself the harder question. Can you afford to stay? Really sit with that. Add up the cost of your peace, your joy, your self-worth. Then ask yourself if any amount of money is worth more than those things. It isn't. It never is. Choose yourself. Fight for yourself. The floor will hold. I promise you the floor will hold. The courthouse on decision day was colder than I expected. Not temperature cold, but the kind that seeps into your bones when you're about to face something final. I'd been through mediation, through settlement talks, through endless emails with Catherine. But this was different. This was the moment Jennifer would see that her assumptions had been dead wrong. She'd laughed when I first mentioned divorce. That sharp, dismissive sound that told me she thought I was bluffing. You can't afford a lawyer, Marcus. We both know that. She'd been so certain. So comfortable in the cage she'd built around our finances. Every dollar accounted for. Every expense managed. She held the keys and thought that made her untouchable. What she didn't know was that family doesn't abandon you when walls close in. David had made sure of that. The retainer she thought would keep me trapped had been handled before she even knew I'd filed. By the time she received those papers, the machine was already in motion. Unstoppable. Inevitable. The courtroom doors opened and I walked in with Catherine beside me. Composed. Prepared. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Jennifer sat with Michael Garrison, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She still hadn't looked at me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe seeing me there, represented and ready, shattered whatever story she'd been telling herself. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Morrison entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of human messiness and wasn't impressed by any of it. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up over her reading glasses. Before we proceed, the judge said, I understand there's been a settlement agreement reached between the parties. Is that correct? Catherine stood. Yes, Your Honor. Both parties have agreed to terms. We're here for final approval and decree issuance. Judge Morrison nodded and gestured for her to continue. Catherine laid out the terms with precision. Equal division of retirement assets. Jennifer retaining the house with buyout of Marcus's equity at appraised value. Each party responsible for their own legal fees. No spousal maintenance requested or granted. Clean dissolution with all terms agreed upon in writing. The judge listened, occasionally making notes, her expression neutral. When Catherine finished, Judge Morrison turned to Jennifer's side. Mr. Garrison, does your client agree with these terms as stated? Garrison stood, smoothing his tie. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Webb agrees to all terms and is prepared to execute the final documents. The judge made another note, then looked directly at Jennifer. Mrs. Webb, you understand that by agreeing to these terms, you're waiving any future claims to additional assets or support from Mr. Webb? Jennifer's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. Judge Morrison's gaze shifted to me. Mr. Webb, you also understand and agree to these terms? I stood, keeping my voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. I do. The judge reviewed the paperwork one final time, her pen moving across signature lines with practiced efficiency. Then she looked up at both of us. Marriage dissolution carries consequences that extend beyond this courtroom. You've both agreed to terms that seem equitable given the circumstances. I'm approving this settlement. Your marriage is hereby dissolved. You're both free to move forward separately. Court adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound that felt louder than it probably was. Final. Absolute. Catherine gathered her papers and turned to me with a small, professional smile. It's done, she said quietly. You're officially divorced. I nodded, feeling something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I had been holding. Jennifer stood, her movements stiff and mechanical. She whispered something to Garrison, who nodded and began packing his briefcase. She glanced in my direction once, just a flicker, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not defiance. Just exhaustion. Like she'd finally run out of stories to tell and didn't know who she was without them. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught sight of someone standing near the back row. David. He'd driven down that morning without telling me, just to be there. Just in case I needed him. When Jennifer saw him, she froze mid-step. Her face went pale. She'd underestimated everything. My resolve. My resources. My support system. But seeing David there, the brother who'd written the check that made all of this possible, that was the moment her miscalculation became real. David didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. Didn't say a word. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, a quiet presence that said everything that needed saying. You thought he was alone. He wasn't. You thought he couldn't fight. He did. You thought wrong. Jennifer looked away first, turning quickly and walking out through the side exit with Garrison trailing behind her. David walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. How are you holding up? I considered the question. Relieved, I said finally. Exhausted. But relieved. He nodded. That's normal. Let's get out of here. Catherine shook David's hand before we left, thanking him for his support. She knew the role he'd played. Everyone did. Without him, I might still be sitting in that kitchen, staring at a retainer I couldn't afford, convinced I had no options. We went to lunch at a quiet diner, the kind with vinyl booths and waitresses who've worked there for decades. David ordered a burger. I got coffee and barely touched it. The adrenaline was draining out of my system, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue. It's over, I said, more to myself than to him. Actually over. David raised his water glass. To freedom. To new chapters. To proving that you're stronger than anyone gave you credit for. We clinked glasses and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Not just for the money, though that had been crucial. For the belief. For the showing up. For the reminder that I wasn't disposable just because someone had treated me that way. David had given me more than financial support. He'd given me a mirror that reflected my worth when I'd forgotten what it looked like. Walking out of that courthouse, I carried no bitterness. No desire for revenge. Just clarity. Jennifer had built a trap with our shared finances, convinced that control equaled power. But she'd forgotten something essential. Power isn't about control. It's about choices. And I'd made mine. I chose honesty over comfort. Truth over pretending. Myself over a marriage that had become a monument to lies. The retainer she said I couldn't afford had bought me something priceless. Not just legal representation. My dignity back. My voice. My future. Every dollar David loaned me was an investment in the truth. And truth, it turns out, has a return rate no bank can match. It gives you back yourself. That's worth more than any settlement, any house, any relationship that requires you to stay small. Jennifer learned something that day too, though I doubt she'd admit it. You can't build a life on assumptions. You can't trap someone and expect them to thank you for the cage. And you definitely can't tell someone they're powerless and expect them to believe it forever. Eventually, they'll find a window. A door. A brother willing to drive 3 hours and sit in a courthouse just to prove they're not alone. That's the part she never saw coming. Not the lawyer. Not the evidence. Not the settlement. The part where I had people who refused to let me drown. The part where love showed up not with flowers and apologies, but with a check and a phone call. And a hand on my shoulder saying, I've got you. That's the power she couldn't control. That's the strength she couldn't measure. That's why she lost. And me? I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. One day. One decision. One honest moment at a time. The courthouse doors closed behind us that afternoon, and I walked out into autumn sunlight feeling lighter than I had in years. Free. Clear. Ready for whatever came next. because now I knew something Jennifer had tried to make me forget. I was never trapped. I just needed to remember I had the key all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.